Hello and welcome to another episode of the High Growth Leadership Podcast with me, David Blair.
And me, Simon West.
So we had a fascinating discussion today with Mark Edmondson. So Mark is the founder and CEO of Inflo. Inflo are a software provider to the audit and accountancy profession who are really disrupting that market.
Yep, we had a really broad-ranging conversation with Mark, and he was kind enough to touch on the transition he made from a very successful corporate career at PwC into co-founding Inflo with Graham. Yeah. Also touched on successes and failures from their efforts to break into the American market as they pursue their stated aim of $1 billion valuation and unicorn status.
And that was really interesting, wasn't it? There's lots of businesses out there who would love to crack America. They've done it. How they've done it is... with incredible amount of dedication, but it's really interesting.
Pretty unusual in so much as they've taken no external finance to help them along the way.
Absolutely. So for a business to have got to 150 heads after 9 years without taking any external funding is unusual. For a software provider to do that with all of the upfront development cost, even more unusual, and it's really fascinating when he talks us through how they achieved that. It's a fascinating discussion with a very, very interesting guest who was also kind enough to bring us a copy of the second book that he's written about the market that they face. So yeah, very interesting guest and a fascinating discussion. We hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Hi Mark, and welcome to the High Growth Leadership Podcast with Blair West, and thank you very much for joining us today. Delighted to have you here. Mark, you are the founder and the CEO of Inflo, which is a revolutionising the audit landscape, but you are much better positioned than Simon or I to tell us about it. So please, can you give us some context about Inflo and the markets you address?
So great to be here. Inflo, we're a SaaS company that focuses on trying to put better technology into the hands of accountants. We focus specifically, as you say, on the audit part of what accountancy firms do. And our bigger picture, North Star, is around making audit more attractive, which we're doing through giving them better technology to be able to perform that work, but also trying to elevate the relevance of what firms are able to do and the skills that they have available to them.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're here today to talk about high growth leadership, and not that there's a bar with which to get invited on this podcast, but if there were, you've sailed past it. We've worked with Inflo, we know how fast you've grown.
That at some point.
We should, yeah. But we know how fast you've grown. It's a tremendous success story. Would like to get into kind of your earlier career and what motivated you to do that. But to provide that greater context, just touching on Inflo for a while, as you are today, could you give us an idea of the scale of Inflo, how many people you have, which markets you're facing at the moment?
So Inflo right now, we're in September 2024. We're around 150 employees now. We are in 106 different countries in terms of our customer profile, although we do major on the US and the UK markets predominantly. We've been very successful with zero investment into the business. So this has been a pure organic growth story over a 9-year period to be able to really establish ourselves as one of the leading global players in the technology that serves accounting firms. And we're recognized the world over, not just for the technology that we've produced, but also the expertise that we've brought into what I'd say is a quite traditional profession that hasn't necessarily embraced innovation until we really started to drive it.
Yeah, indeed. As a former auditor myself, who's had the privilege of the red pen and going down ticking invoices, I can absolutely confirm that it hasn't exactly embraced change. So it makes all the achievements of Inflo all the more remarkable. So that's 9 years to 150 people, 106 different countries, and no investment raised to date. So I think if you said to the average person in the street, or even perhaps Mark Edmondson 10 years ago, that it was possible to build that scale of software business without raising any money or investment, you might raise an eyebrow or two. Was that always the plan, how you managed to do that? That we don't, we have a lot of software clients, most of them have had to raise money to fund that development. How have you done it without doing that?
First and foremost, I would say that if you told me 9 years ago we could do this, I would fully have believed that we could have done. I do have a level of confidence in not just my ability, but also my ability to bring together a great team of people who could do something transformational and build something incredible. What I would say is we didn't set out with a view that we would never raise money. We, in fact, in the very early stages, started to, I'd say, put a bit of the groundwork in with investors to kind of say, well, look, we're starting, we don't need you right now, but we might come back to you at some point in time and tell you that we've just delivered what we were thinking of doing and we might need more help. But throughout that journey, we always, in those, I would say those first 3-4 years, the challenge we faced was that we knew from our network and stories just how much time it would take to raise capital. And we were told that, it's going to take your CEO and your COO, which that's our two main founders who were driving the business, 3 to 6 months of serious focus to really raise capital. And I always said to my co-founder, well, if you gave me 3 to 6 months to go and speak to customers, I'll raise more money than I would be able to through funding. And we won't liquidate the business. But the biggest thing for us wasn't necessarily the liquidation, it's the control factor. From our perspective, as soon as you raise money, you jump onto a treadmill and you don't actually control how fast that treadmill's going anymore. I'm sure there's some great investors out there that will give you more control over the treadmill, but we had some serious concerns that we didn't really know exactly what we wanted to do with the business, bigger picture, long term. And we didn't want to, have to try and write that down to be able to tell the investor what the story would be. And B, we didn't feel we wanted to be constrained by that investor and their exit strategy, their funds, time frame, etc. So throughout the journey, we were constantly kind of criticizing ourselves as saying, well, why aren't we raising money? Everybody else is raising money. Everybody tells us we should be raising money.
And everybody's very keen to invest as well. We get asked by PE clients about Inflo a lot, and knowing that we work with you. So yeah, the appetite's definitely there.
Yeah, just please don't refer them to me. But my assistant spends a good chunk of her day every day trying to filter my inbox for the amount of approaches that we get, because the business is a very attractive business from the outside looking in. It's achieved some incredible success in terms of the awards it's won, the way that we've been ranked in some of the high growth listings here in the north of England, but also nationally in Deloitte's Fast 50 and things like that. So we've always felt that focus, that time that it would take to raise money was better spent actually working on our business and working with our customers. And until we found a point where that inflected and we felt like capital would make a big difference, we didn't want to press that button. And the other piece I think that is important for maybe people thinking about this and listening to this is the demographics of our market also impact that. And by that I mean, I didn't feel like if we all of a sudden had $10 to $30 million to burn, that we could really move the accounting profession forward much quickly than it was going to move itself anyway. Our market is quite conservative. It doesn't instantly jump on the latest thing. So just because you can spend a huge amount more on marketing to get the message out there doesn't necessarily going to mean you're going to convert that into your annual recurring revenue any quicker than you would have done anyway. So a few things that I think were unique to our situation, but also probably a few things that others can glean some insights from in terms of how we approached it.
There seems to be quite a strong theme of independence and decision making in that as well then.
I believe that the management team we have are really committed to our plan and we know we can execute on that plan. So if you have a plan that everybody is really inspired by and believe is going to be disruptive and you don't need capital, why would you go and raise capital? And so that's been our position. And we have an incredible senior management team, leadership team that we've really grown through the ranks. And they are so aligned to our vision to disrupt this market that that's what really excites me much more than bringing in an investor who could in theory give us a leg up. We just didn't feel like that was going to be significant enough.
And what's I think really interesting there is the honesty with which you said at that point you didn't quite know amongst yourselves what you wanted to do with the business and where you wanted to go. I imagine there's a lot of founder owners out there in a similar position, but there's a pressure to never really to act like you have absolutely decisive, and you absolutely know what the next 5 to 10 years look like, and you've got an ironclad plan that's written down. And certainly if you go into a process, you need to raise money, you need to exude that confidence that you know exactly what you're going to do. So it's very honest to say, well, that was one of the factors in our thought, that we don't know exactly where we want to go, so therefore we don't want to pretend that we do and get on that treadmill.
Obviously, also in our experience, when we deal with businesses that have multiple founders, it's not always the case that if they don't have perfect clarity of vision, that they can stay aligned around when they come to these sort of different inflection points and different milestones. But you guys seem to have kept everybody on the same page.
Yeah, well, Inflo, there's two main founders, myself and Graham Clark, and we both worked together at PwC before we founded Inflo. So we'd already established a really strong working relationship, a lot of trust there in terms of we were both happy to basically sign up to, let's do this. And we both wanted to do something entrepreneurial, I think, for many years. This was the vehicle that, let's do this. But one thing we've made sure is that we always try and find at least once a quarter a time to sit down and try and remove ourselves from the CEO and COO seats that we run in the business and try and put that shareholders hat on and say, okay, how do we feel like the business is going from a shareholder's perspective? What do we want to achieve as shareholders? And that's when things like, people start telling you, oh, maybe you should start taking some chips off the table, and private equity, minority interests is a great way to do that, etc. It's around the two of you sitting down and going, what do you actually want to get out of this? Like, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And both of us actually support each other in terms of going through some of the family considerations around that. It's not just about, like, as business partners, what do you want? What do I want? We've worked through issues like, what happens if one of us dies? Like, what are we going to do about it? And we've worked through that, not because we want to plan for the worst, but because we want to know that our families on either side are going to be supported through that. If we keep doing it like this, what's the risk? What do we need to think about? And how do we work through those problems so we're both getting what we want from this? And we're both open enough to admit, actually, my views have changed. I want to do this. I want to do that. And we work together to support each other in that. So there's never any conflict between the two of us in terms of what we're trying to achieve with the business.
That's really interesting because Simon and I co-founded this business, and we definitely have those conversations. But the discipline to divorce your role as a director from your role as a shareholder, and say we're talking about shareholder stuff today, it's very easy, especially if you're busy lives and you're both busy, you get some time together and you immediately dive into dealing with the director stuff, the day-to-day stuff on the business, finding the time to actually talk about your shareholder perspective.
Yeah, and I guess for when you and I met, we hadn't worked together, so we had to sort of establish that we'd have the right sort of dynamic and trust pretty quickly, but in a fairly condensed time frame. You and Graham had the opportunity to do that over a much longer period of time.
So how did you two go about that then?
Well, there's a variety of people now who claim credit for putting us in touch, but I mean, I guess we both had a similar idea of what we wanted to do, and had come to a point of thinking that it would be better done with two founders rather than one. But yeah, a variety of the people who I think potentially approach you about doing work for you that isn't necessarily investment-wise, I think put us together eventually.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if this is cliched, but we did spend a lot of time sitting down writing out a set of values for the business and then refining them, and realised we were on the same page as to what they were, and there was no huge gaps. It still seems like quite a jump now that I look back five years on, but it's worked out. So hey, well,
you guys have come on great bounds in that 5 years, right? And that's as two people leading a business, you have to be on the same page. It's okay to disagree on things, but you need to agree to disagree and then work out how you're going to lead the business. And I think that healthy conflict is something that Graham and I have always felt really comfortable with, in terms of we're happy to disagree with each other. In fact, we're starting to do it deliberately more in front of people in our business to show that it's okay to disagree on things. You don't need to say yes to everything I want you to do. You don't need to agree with every idea we have. We need that healthy and constructive debate across the business. So
yeah. And how do you resolve them?
How do we resolve what?
When there is a difference of opinion or a different approach, is it it go to the rest of the board, or?
We really looked at our core values. So our core values are built around the Geek Way. So if you haven't read the book, The Geek Way, I highly recommend it. But
I haven't. So.
The core values of our business are built around the 4 key concepts of the Geek Way. So it's around speed, science, openness, and ownership. And so if we disagree on something, we really are going to look to the data or look to get some supporting evidence to be able to say, okay, so we've got 2 potential theories or 2 potential ways we could go through here. We can either go and get the data to support one of those, or we might be in a situation where we could run both of them and then let the data tell us which one is the better outcome. So we try and be led by that kind of more scientific approach to it, but both comfortable that our idea doesn't have to win.
Okay.
It has to be the best idea for the business. So it's around not trying to champion your idea too much, but being open that we've got 2 theories. Let's work out which one's the best one.
Yeah, indeed. But it resonated with me, something you said earlier, and I'd like to think Simon and I have this, where being comfortable when we've had difficult decisions to make in the business at times, and you discuss it, and you come to a decision, you go home, you sleep on it, and coming in the next day and saying, I've changed my mind. I thought about it overnight, and I now think we should go the opposite direction. And I think good partnership requires that you don't feel that you need to cling to your original position just for the sake of appearing consistent. So you touched on it there, that you and Graham had worked together for a long time. So going back to your early career, that was at PwC. And you were part of the innovation team there, is that right? You said you'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Is that something that you and Graham openly talked about a lot?
Not at PwC. So my background, I come from a farming background in the Lake District originally. So I came from and I was the oldest son as well. So I was supposed to take on the farm. That was my career set in stone from day one.
Any regrets?
No, I never really ever understood the calculator that worked out how farmers made any money at all. For me, though, it was around, okay, so I'm used to that I wouldn't say entrepreneurial background, but that kind of sole trader type mindset,
the
right?
Business owner mentality, yeah.
You own a business, you build a business. That's what I kind of came from. When I went to university, I then jumped from that to working for one of the biggest employers in the whole of the UK. So PwC is massive, right? And what I found was that I wasn't completely aligned with the corporate culture of PwC. I was the one who was willing to be quite vocal and to talk out about things that were wrong, things that needed to be fixed, etc., which they kind of embrace in the early years because they kind of want somebody at the lower levels who's prepared to voice up what's going on, what's happening, etc. But I think over time, they really want you to conform to the corporate game playing. I like to call it snakes and ladders, is basically working at one of these big corporates because you're trying to play the game to get to the top. You're not actually trying to learn how to run a business. And so I always felt like at some point in time, I would hit the point where I wanted to jump out. I think a lot of people who work for big accounting firms, it's about get your exams done, get your letters behind your name, and then go and do something else, right? And that was always my mindset in the early stages, but I viewed it as long as I'm learning more here than they're getting from me, then I'm fine with this transaction. It's at the point where I feel like they're getting a lot more out of me than I'm getting from them that I need to really look at that. So every year there was something new that I could get involved in. So I moved from just doing audits to working on innovation locally, then regionally, nationally. And then I worked on some of the biggest international projects to truly transform the thousands and thousands of auditors around the world that work for PricewaterhouseCoopers. They were using the things that I'd built, that I deployed. But it was at the point where I led a global project where I think they calculated that I'd saved with this project about 15% of hours across the world was kind of the headline internal numbers. And then they came up to me as my year-end appraisal and said, that's great, you can have an £8,000 bonus. I was like, guys, I understand that you've got a bell curve and that you need to fit this kind of performance appraisal into this, but at some point, you've got to surely think about the bigger picture of if I walked into your business as a consultant and said, I can save you 15% of hours across the world, I think you'd be willing to pay more than $8,000 for that. And that's the point where I realized that maybe if I have this level of confidence and this level of experience in what I've done here, I looked at the rest of the market and saw that yes, the big four firms were building their own technology and spending hundreds of millions, it's now billions of dollars on these things. And I looked at what everybody else was doing. I was like, I think we could build something here that took our experience and our skills and created something that the rest of the profession could really benefit from. So that was really the kind of the genesis, if you like, of what we created as a business.
So you talked at the start of the conversation in relation to Inflo's growth that actually the practice is not necessarily, a hotbed of innovation. It's a very conservative industry. Did you find that the landscape internally within PwC, even as a large corporate, was actually pretty sort of change positive when it came to the things that you were working on, like mindset and culture-wise?
It's a great question. So what effectively happened was in 2012, there was a startup formed within a big corporate. And I got to be part of that startup where basically that small team of people were tasked with innovation. And to be quite honest, they didn't have the guardrails on the thing properly. And so we were able to do a lot of stuff a lot quicker than you would expect in a business like that because there was a big regulatory change. They needed to respond to it and they just set up some teams and made some stuff happen. So it was almost by accident that I got to start a startup within a big corporate.
It's interesting.
And then a lot of the skills that I learned in that team, and Graham was part of that team as well, was then what allowed us to have the knowledge, expertise, and importantly, the credibility in the market to be able to go and start something else. Because a lot of our early customers were simply backing Mark and Graham, ex-PwC guys who've built technology before. Hey, let's come on this ride with these guys. This sounds cool.
Interesting. We do a lot of, our target market for recruitment is SMEs. And when we're presenting a candidate shortlist, a conversation that we have time and time again is if someone's making a transition from a corporate background to an SME world, will they be able to make that transition? And one of the things, we like to think we've got a lot better at it over the years of identifying who will and who will not make that transition successfully. We don't get them all right, but our percentage is going up. And one of the key factors is, or key indicators that they might make that transition well is what were they responsible for in the corporate? Were they responsible for new teams, new products, new ideas, innovation? And more what we're hearing as well is, were they a dissenting voice at times? Did they say things a little bit differently? And it's actually in one of our earlier podcast episodes, somebody who also made that transition really successfully. When we asked them, they said, well, I was always the odd voice out. I was always the one saying we should do it this way when we were doing it that way. And it sounds similar with yourself.
Yeah, are you a bit of a vocal, like some of the leaders would call you the vocal dickhead, right? The guy who's like always got an opinion on something, always thinks it can be done better. And what you find is in a corporate, if you're that person who always has an opinion and always thinks something can be done better, most of the time they'll just say, well, if you feel so good about, like so strongly about it, then you fix it. Like you go and do something about it. That's more entrepreneurial. If you're in a corporate and you're simply trying to play the annual game of bullshit around how to basically fill in your performance appraisal, that ain't going to cut it in the real world. Like there's so many people that think they're business people, but they actually are just trading off the brand of a big corporate. Yeah, sure, you can go and win work because you work for X. Go and win work in the market when you don't have that brand. Good luck to you. Like that's the difference between an entrepreneur and somebody who can sit in a corporate and think that they're playing real business. It's not real business, it's just brand business, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. I started my career at a rival at PwC, KPMG. And I loved my time there and met some great friends and associates, which are some of the best friends still today. But some of the things you're touching on there, the amount of time and energy that is put into the annual appraisal system and the amount of time taken discussing that at the water cooler, what have you, is, if you haven't been through it, is unbelievable. It's dominates for at least 2 or 3 months a year, dominates conversation in the office. And I can always remember a real sense of when there were big changes that were happening. It might be a little bit unpopular with the rank and file, the pressure which you touched on earlier for the more senior people to definitely tell the same story and everybody get behind the story. I was very junior, so who knows what they said behind closed doors in meeting rooms. But certainly there was absolutely no room for dissenting voices in anybody above management level within the team. Which makes me wonder, so that was you, dissenting voice. You're getting to a certain size now. Do you have people like that in your business? And is it something that you think about culturally? You're making it comfortable for people to come with that different view?
Yeah, it's a really important part of, again, reference to Geek Way, but like that kind of mindset of you've got to create a safe space where people feel comfortable dissenting. Now, I think there's way more we can do about that, because I think people start their career from a position of, I have to conform, I have to say yes, we have to make this work. And I'd say one of the things that even Graham and I have tried to deliberately do is to disagree with each other in front of everyone, and to deliberately try and promote that idea of, let's throw everything out there and talk about this, and there is no stupid idea, and we can work through any of these things. It's tricky to try and make everyone feel comfortable with that, because that's not the world that anyone's experienced if they've been in the world of work before. Certainly if we bring a lot of people in from accounting firms, they're not used to that being welcomed, if you like. But we also try and support it through the growth of our internal people. So how can we make sure that the people rising up through the ranks are the ones who are being vocal, and that they're willing to challenge Graham and I's views on things? So it's a tricky one. I don't have the secret sauce to that one, but I think it's much more about the culture that you're trying to create. So we do things like we did a global gathering here in Newcastle, where we get the entire team from around the world into the room together here. And it's around trying to, in that area, bring people in that are going to start to show our core values off, to talk about what we're trying to achieve, and create ways that people can give feedback to us in different ways that feels comfortable for them. Maybe some people feel comfortable talking about it. Maybe some people want to email about it. Maybe others want to do it in different ways through workshops and things like that. So how do you create those arenas where people feel comfortable sharing that dissentive voice?
Indeed.
And thinking about the sort of innovation team internally at PwC, had you and Graham worked in the business in sort of more usual audit roles previously, or was that when you guys first met each other?
No, so we'd worked together in Newcastle locally. So I had my 10 clients, and Graham had these new ideas around how we could use data to put on the audit. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it on all 10 of my clients, or 20 or whatever it was. And I was like the first person to just go, I get it, let's do it. And everyone else was like, oh, well, maybe let's see what Mark does. And so the two of us were constantly trying to go, okay, so I want to achieve this, you've got this, how do we put that together and create something? So we did that on my clients, then we did it on the Newcastle clients, then we did it on all the North region clients, then we started to scale it out globally. And that was really interesting. He ended up going to France to try and implement it in France. I was in the US doing more over there. So the two of us kind of went on that journey, but then we broke away from each other. But we'd worked together on the same audits as well. I remember like one of Graham's first audits was working for me on a client that was an absolute mess, and the two of us were trying to unpick this thing and get it to work. So no, we worked very tactically together on doing the day job, but then we worked also that bigger picture, more strategic stuff. So which I think has helped us be able to shift gears as we're working through this business.
And then how does the conversation around, okay, well, we've done loads of really great things, we can demonstrably show that we're adding value to this organization globally. How does the conversation around, okay, well, you and I could go and do something, how did that germinate?
So Graham had already left. And I was, it was clear that I didn't want to stay any longer. And so it was really a case of we met each other in Blake's coffee shop here in Newcastle. Sat down and I said, I feel like the two of us have some really good skills. I've got a business, early draft of a business plan. Would you mind reviewing it for me and give me your thoughts on, like, if you think this is something, not to deliberately kind of ask him to get involved, but also to kind of go, look, I'm not sure I can do this on my own. So like, what do you think? And, the feedback straight back was, let's do it together. And so that was really how it kind of came to be. Graham had already left, I was leaving. And then we sat down and went, I feel like we've got an incredible amount of experience here that we could do something. And we both sat down, jotted out what we thought it would cost to get like an MVP, minimum viable product, stood up to really kind of test the market. And we went, you know what, the two of us can dig that out of our pockets and can give this a shot. So if we can agree to how we split it, and that was a 3-minute conversation, I think, we just went, right, let's do it. Let's get on with this. And yeah.
Did you have a good sense of what that would cost, for given that you've been developing innovative software products at PwC? Because I think for a lot of people, who are hopefully listening to this podcast, with a good idea, who aren't tech-minded, maybe the anticipated cost or what they would be estimating in their head of creating a software product that they could take to a highly regulated industry, they would assume that that's a very, very big number. How did you have the knowledge yourselves of what that would cost, or did you have to go out and get that costed by a developer to understand that you'd be able to do it?
Do you want to know how much we thought it would cost?
I don't want to be that pry that.
Well, if you're happy to tell us, then yeah.
We thought it would cost 30k. 30k to
Well,
get
I think a
stood
lot
up.
of people would imagine a much bigger number than that. If you'd asked me, what do you think it would cost to develop a audit software program that was credible in front of highly regulated clients, I would have said at least 5 times that.
Yeah. And that's because most people think about building the perfect finished product, and what you're trying to focus on is how do you adopt the principles of Agile and develop something that's almost embarrassingly bad but could do the job as quickly as you possibly can. It took us 1 week to get our first customer.
Well, and who was that?
It was Tate Walker here in Newcastle, which has now been acquired and is part of the Assets business. And we walked in, and the beauty of what we were doing, so we're a SaaS company, but in the very early months, that was spreadsheet as a service. So we could basically deliver what we knew was going to be the core output of our data analytics product that we were going to build. And we could do that through off-the-shelf products like Excel. And while we had some developers working on building that product, why not go out and pitch the concept? So we didn't tell people, hey, we've got this idea, like it's a bit of a concept, let's come and let's present a hacky Excel to you. What we did was we did everything we possibly could with Excel to make it look like software. So we hid the ribbons, hid the rows, the comment, like the whole thing, right? Put little buttons in so they were macros that moved you from tab to tab. And we did this pitch, if you want to call it that, to this firm. And we weren't trying to hoodwink them, but we wanted real feedback on a real pitch. Yeah. So we pitched this to them, and then he went, so where do we sign up? I was like, don't know the answer to that question because I haven't got a sales contract. I haven't really worked out how much we're going to charge for this yet. It's week 1. We're like, we'll go away. We'll go and have a think about that. And so we came back and got that all sorted out. But what we knew was, well, hang on a minute. These guys have a fair amount of cash sitting around. These are accountancy firms. They're not
long established. Yeah.
Exactly. Long established, strong balance sheets, etc. We were like, well, why don't we just get them to put 10 grand down on account, and then we'll give these spreadsheets for £500 per client, and there we go. We've got some upfront cash flow. We can go and hire another developer, and we can start doing this. And so that's what really started to feel like. So people talk about an angel round investing. Go and raise your angel off customers, because what you're going to get is firstly free cash, doesn't cost you any liquidity. But also what's more important than that is you get real feedback on your early stage products. Because if people pay £500 for a spreadsheet, they'll give you feedback as to whether that's any good or not. Did it solve the job that you're trying to do here? Because ultimately, yes, you're going to try and build that as software. So is it scalable? It's repeatable, that you don't need. But in the early stages, how quickly can you get your product into your customers' hands and get them paying for it to get that really good feedback? So that's one of the things that fueled us really early stage. So the 30K to stand it up. There's a few other things that we did around how we structured the other founders that brought in, and we got them to really commit to the project. Clearly, we were doing a lot of very bare bones stuff with salaries and things like that, but that comes back to the early point around the desire not to raise. We could have paid ourselves market rate salaries and gone out and raised. For what end, right? It's much smarter to try and keep as much equity as you possibly can in those early stages and keep control, and that's how we played that game.
So it's quite a brave decision for the guys you went to pitch up week 1 to say, yeah, okay, where do we go? Sorry, how do we sign up week 1?
Yeah, but they knew what they were getting themselves in for, so we were very transparent. We had relationships with them already, so that obviously clearly helped. And they'd seen what we could do as individuals, so they were ex-PwC. They'd seen what Graham and I could do. So there's an element of like, they weren't taking much of a leap, right? 10 grand's no big deal to any firm like that. If it is, then you're not in the right game. It's where you kind of then stepped up, and we went and met Grant Thornton 6 months in, and we only had half the product at that point in time. and we had to pitch the whole thing. So we were like, well, here's these bits. We don't have time today to show you everything, but we knew that their procurement process was going to be quite lengthy anyway. And so again, we built relationships with those people where we built credibility. Yeah, sure, we didn't have everything, but we had enough to perk their interest. And then the real inflection point for the business came when Grant Thornton came back to us in month 11 and said, right, let's do a pilot. Like, let's see what this can do. And we absolutely smashed out of the park the one engagement they gave us. They basically said, this is one of the most, or the least profitable clients that we've got. If we can't fix it this year, we'd probably have to resign as the auditors. So you can't really screw this up, guys.
Yeah.
And we absolutely smashed it in terms of just how much time we saved on that art, to the point where it was like spreading virally. People were kind of going, right, you've got to jump on this thing that these guys are using.
And Grant Thornton are what, number 5 in the UK? Is that right?
At the time, they were the 5th biggest. Yeah, they've there's been a bit of change in that top, but they became, if you want, our Series A, Series B, Series C kind of funding rounds, because we'd got that angel round off the ground through the very small, quicker decision-making customers, and we then landed one blue chip enterprise firm who knew what they were getting into, because we were completely transparent. But we were saying, like, let's go on this journey together. Let's make sure the product fully meets your requirement. Let's make sure we scale this out in a way that's going to serve the size of business that you are. And they really supported us, but also we really helped them with a massive project. So it was a marriage that really worked well for everybody involved, and they're still one of our biggest and most dedicated customers now today.
And I imagine when you and Graham sat there and thought, as you said earlier, yeah, the big four are spending millions on developing their own product, but we could go and do something for the rest of the market. Well, getting the biggest one in the rest of the market signed up that early was to them being absolutely delighted. That's kind of it's a hell of a place to start.
Well, and it's also it creates a virality, because our market and many other markets out there, the best form of marketing you can get is still word of mouth. And so firms talk to firms move, people move between firms, etc. And our product gave them a competitive advantage. So when the other accounting firms were hearing that they'd lost this tender process, this sales process that they bid for, and the reason why they'd lost is because the other firm had Inflo, they don't really have much choice of where to go, right? They either do something that's comparable where there isn't really anything that's comparable, or they sign up as well. And so we saw this kind of spread down the market, if you like, as firms competed with firms and we helped them win. You got this virality at the top of the market, and it's something that we're now replicating in the US market and starting to build a heck of a lot of momentum over there, because once you land a few large ones that people really respect and they go, ooh, they're working with that.
They've bought it. Yeah. Interesting. So this isn't a particular mindset that I have, and I try and discourage others in the business from having, but lots of people would be worried there if their product wasn't finished yet and they were going to somebody with pockets as deep as Grant Thornton to say, we've got this great idea which is going to save a whole load of money. We haven't finished building it yet, but what do you think, guys? That they're going to go, yeah, that is a great idea. Thanks very much, Mark. And immediately call up their innovation team if they have one, and they've got deeper pockets that can move faster. How did you worry about that? Were there barriers you put in place? Did you decide that you couldn't afford to worry about it?
Yeah, so the bit maybe challenges, just because they've got deeper pockets doesn't mean they can move faster. And that's what a lot of big corporates really don't understand, in my opinion. They're over-engineering innovation to the point where it needs to be perfect to deploy it. And our approach is, and if you embrace the agile approach, it's all around testing all of the time. And the only way you can test is if you get it into people's hands, right? I think it's Reid Hoffman that maybe says if your first product isn't embarrassingly bad, then you shipped too late, right? The whole mindset here isn't about going on annual release cycles for software, which is what traditional accounting firms would look at. And they still ask us to follow that. Yeah. We're like doing 2 weekly sprints, deploying regularly, getting feedback from people. So that was the mindset we adopted early stages. Now, don't get me wrong, some firms have stolen our IP. They have looked at what we've done and gone, yeah, let's just build what they've done. That's fine. What we're trying to do, though, is create something that's bigger than just the technology. If you can create something where we've actually had companies come to us and say, can you do our audit for us? And we go, no, we're a technology company, but we can refer you to people who are using our software. They give you a great audit, but using our software. That's bigger than the technology. That's now moving kind of the buying process for an audit. Or if you're changing the way that you think about how exams work and education, we have a partnership in the UK with the ICAW, which means every single student in England and Wales who wants to become an accountant has to use our software to pass their exams. Now, that's huge, right? That's grassroots movement.
Yeah, phenomenal.
You can't replicate that.
Yeah.
You can look at our product and try and build it. You can't get every student in the UK educated on what the product does. So it's those kind of bigger picture plays that I don't worry too much about IP theft. It's going to happen. I think one of your previous podcasts talked a lot about theft and that kind of mimicking of products, etc. Like for us, you can't replicate our speed. You can't replicate the way that we're moving things forward. And in reality, we also have such big databases right now. Like that's really difficult to replicate. When you start thinking about AI or use of data, good luck to you trying to catch up.
Indeed. And then sticking with Inflo, just touching on I follow your content on LinkedIn and your other marketing content, and I know that you are very, very consistent in it being a mission-led business, and you're there to try and improve the industry in which you operate in, not just Inflo. Interested in at what point you and Graham started having that conversation, how you, now that you've got 150 people, how you get everybody else to buy into that and share that view?
It's a really interesting question. So it probably comes back to some of the fundamentals around as founders, like what is success to you? What are you trying to achieve? And for us, it's never been about making a ton of money. Like, it's fine if that's what you get into business for. If you want to create a company because you want to make 5-10 million quid, whatever, fine. That's a very great objective, and that's clear what you need to go and do. For us, we left PwC predominantly because we wanted to do something, certainly for me, I can speak to my motives. I didn't want at the end of my career to basically retire and then somebody just steps in my shoes and carries on and everybody forgets I was even there 3 months later. Like, next person up wasn't really something that excited me. I wanted to create some kind of legacy, something that I could go at the end of my career, whatever that is, and say, yeah, I created that. And so for me, the motivation isn't about an exit at a certain value. That's, I'm in a fortunate position where I could sell the business tomorrow and I would never have to work again. And that would be exciting and a really great achievement for a lot of people. For me, it doesn't really cut it because I want to do something much bigger than that. I want to leave some kind of legacy on the profession that I've worked my entire career in. And I believe has a relevance problem if people like me don't actually do something about it. And so that's, to me, the bigger objective is around like the relevance of accountants, of auditors, and trying to make it something where students actually want to be accountants, because it really saddens me right now that people talk about like nobody should want to be an accountant, nobody should aspire to. That's quite sad to me.
Yeah, I, as an accountant myself, I get approached often by friends whose kids are at, career choice phase of their life and say, they're considering being an accountant. Will you have a chat with them? Or they consider a training contract before you have a chat with them? I would say, audit wasn't for me long term. I was one of the people thinking I'll get the letters and then move on to something different. But I absolutely loved it. Go and see different businesses every week, build some friendships which will should last a long time and are helpful in business. And I would say as a pathway to understanding business and assessing what you might want to do, it's fantastic. Yeah, indeed. And sticking on that theme of accountants, so you sell to accountants, you are an accountant, and you also hire accountants and turn them into salespeople. Now, many people will have dropped whatever they're holding at the point they've said that. So how do you, if you people who hold deeply held stereotypes about accountants and their personalities, three excellent examples here that it's not true. But
I had a good grace to fail my exams unlike you two.
People will be thinking you can't turn accountants into salespeople. You can't do it very often, but that is a key part of Inflo's strategy. So how have you approached that? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, so firstly, we don't just try and turn accountants into salespeople. We try and turn accountants into marketing people. We turn them into product people. We really try and bring across our whole business the domain expertise that we think is really important to what we do. It touches on a couple of things you've already asked me about around how do we get everybody to align to a vision? Well, it's very helpful to get a lot of people who are from the profession that you're trying to advance and have that first-hand experience of how, should we say, dated some of the working practices are, to be motivated to change that. It's also really important for me that the way we talk to the market and the way that we try and approach how we as a business are interacting with not just our customer base, but the broader stakeholders, comes from a position of educated, informed, and knowledge sharing kind of mindset. And by that, I mean, like a lot of SaaS companies, you're obviously trying to produce content as part of your marketing strategy. And, there's hundreds of agencies out there. There's all sorts of people who are, experts in creating content. But I, as an accountant, can read it and within about 20 seconds can tell whether it was written by somebody who actually knows what they're talking about or somebody who is trying to look like they know what they're talking about.
100%. We've experimented with copywriters and for content before and quickly came to the same position. Yeah.
And every single thing that goes out on my LinkedIn feed, I personally wrote. And it's the only way to get authentic content to be created. You could try and use Gen AI and all this kind of stuff that's going on, but the only way to create really good cutting content as part of that plan is to do it yourself, in my opinion. And so we try and bring that domain expertise across our entire business. So when any customer speaks to us, they don't have to spend the first 5 to 10 minutes of any conversation explaining what an audit is, explaining what we're trying to do on this particular activity. My team know instantly what they're trying to do, and they already have 3 other ideas of how they could do that. And that's a completely different value proposition, is that we've got the software, yes, but what we've also offered you is a partnership where instead of us just buying the software off us, you're actually trying to partner with an innovation partner. Like, we can work together on this because we're trying to do something big picture. Do you want to be part of that club? And some firms, they don't want to be part of that. That's absolutely fine. But we're really clear to the market of our proposition isn't just technology. It's the expertise that we have on team that you can tap into as well, which most firms just wouldn't be able to afford, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and we've benefited from that in different ways. We've got qualified accountants doing finance and CFO recruitment. We've got a gentleman who used to work in a SaaS business doing technology recruitment for our client base. So that instant credibility around subject matter understanding we benefit from as well.
Empathy,
and empathy as well. Yeah.
Understanding, absolutely. Great. And so that makes perfect sense. How have you found that the transition makes perfect sense from your client's perspective, that they have that understanding? I suppose the other part of it is them then having the kind of the sales skills or the product skills or the marketing skills or whatever new position you transition them towards. How have you found that people make that transition?
So firstly, like one of the things we do is we try and prepare that role for it to be performed by an accountant rather than by somebody who you would see as a traditional person. So if we look at the role of a salesperson, we moved all of the cold calling into an SDR team, a sales development representative team, because we knew that accountants wouldn't feel comfortable cold calling people. Okay, so let's pull that bit out. We also take time to really think about how we word job descriptions and responsibilities to say, well, it might be the same terminology, like it might be different terminology. It's the same kind of thing. If we can explain it in the words that an accountant would understand or think is acceptable, then that's better than using jargon that's more akin to SaaS software people. And the other bit is like, we have to think about remuneration quite differently. So sales reps, you would traditionally bring them in on a lower base with a higher OTE. No accountant knows what the heck an OTE is. And so you've got to try and think about, right, well, how do we structure remuneration that is attractive for somebody to take that role, but also maybe gives us what we want as a business. Now, we don't want transactional sales of back to bad fit customers. So how do we actually think about some of these really fundamental things quite differently to prepare our business to embrace the sheer power of the skill set of the accountants that we want to bring in without scaring them away from day one or scaring them away 6 to 12 months into the role?
Yeah. Interesting. So returning to your good self, you came from a farming family background and used to business ownership. Then you've talked through your experience at PwC and why the dissenting voice and eager for improvement. How long had you been working with Graham and set up when you thought, yes, this is me. I enjoy this. This is what I've wanted. Or is there not time to reflect on that when you're too busy setting up a small business?
I'd say from day one, it felt really exciting what we were doing. I like to say right now, I'm totally unemployable at this point in time. I am so set in this way that we work. It could never really work for somebody else, etc. So I think what I'd say to your question is it's always felt really natural. But what I really enjoy is the fact that I'm constantly learning so much because nobody's ever done this before. Not in my sector. I know I can obviously learn from others who've done similar things in different sectors. But in terms of the specifics of what we're trying to do, the technical things, I just love problem solving. And being a CEO in a company like this, it's just all about problem solving or trying to help other people solve problems or avoid getting them solved into. So that's what I always view my role as being, yes, I've got to work on the culture of the business and how we're trying to deal with big macro things, but I'm really there to try and just either help solve the problems when they get too big or to try and help my teams be better at solving problems or avoid problems in the first place.
Okay. Do you worry at all that as the business continues to scale, the balance of your role will switch more towards helping them solve problems? Does that still give you your problem-solving fix if that's what you love, or do you need to be in there looking at the client's issue and helping solve it to get that fix?
It's a really good question. So we've been working quite hard as a business to really put structure in around roles and responsibilities because you're absolutely right. A business as high growth as ours, one of the failings you can have is that everybody's doing everything, which sounds good. Great. We've got generalists. We've got people who are prepared to roll their sleeves up.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it just doesn't scale. And so we run our business.
Sounds familiar as well.
It just doesn't scale. So we run our business using the entrepreneurial operating system. So EOS, which is from the book Traction by Gino Wickman. If you've not come across it and you think that your business is not focusing on the right things, you need to read that book.
We should have a show notes thing where we sort of post all these things because we get loads of really good resources recommended.
So that book is all about, at the top of the business, there should be a visionary role and there should be an integrator role. The integrator reports into the visionary, and then beneath that you have people who are leading the core functions of the business. So you need to work out what the core functions of the business are, but you put one person in on top of each one of those. So in our business, I am the visionary. Graham is the integrator, and that's because he is way better at making things happen, setting goals, setting tangible objectives, holding people accountable, etc., like that day-to-day, making operations happen. I am stronger in being out in the market, sharing that vision, building relationships, standing on a stage, etc. And that's how we did it from day one. We just didn't know we were following this principle, but we put it in about 6 years ago. And what that means is that, yes, at times of change when maybe we've had to make a change at a senior leadership team position or something's happened, sometimes we get sucked back into performing a role for a period while we kind of, keep the business going, keep that structure in place. But what we've been able to do is then recently elevate a number of our team members to lead those functions. And so I'm not in any way concerned about stepping away from the tactical. Yes, I love the buzz of a sale, but I've lost the will to work through legal terms with accounting firm procurement teams and all that good stuff now, where other people have more energy and enthusiasm for that. I can still help them when they need to. But right now for me, my focus needs to be on how do I scale out culture? How do I work on those bigger picture things when you're disrupting a market? And yes, I love to jump on a sales call now and again and help the team out. But what I need to get a buzz out of now is that the team is succeeding, that they're winning the contracts. And so you need to move from a kind of individual contributor type mindset to being now much more of a, like, you know, I don't know what the football analogy might be, more the director of football. Like, you are their general manager for NFL fans. Like, the whole, I'm trying to build a team now. I'm trying to build an organization rather than, you know, be on the field.
Yeah, indeed.
I was going to ask, a lot of the UK-based software companies that we work with have aspirations to scale and develop markets overseas. I think when we spoke in the past, you talked about the amount of time you now spend living over in the States to help the business grow there. Could you share, say, one or two sort of key learnings about taking what was a, say, UK-founded business overseas successfully?
Well, I can probably tell you how to do it successfully and unsuccessfully, because one of the things, you know, when we first tried the US market for us, that's about half our global market. So basically what that means is if we make it in America, we could forget about every other country and it'd be exactly the same thing. So clearly getting to America and breaking America is worth a lot of money for our business. We went to the market probably 6 years ago, so about 2 or 3 years into our journey, and we made all of the classic mistakes. We kind of underestimated the difference between the UK and the US. So sure, just stick some Z's in it and it'll look American. Yeah, it doesn't quite cut it. We also didn't really spend enough time with customers understanding whether their pain points were exactly the same thing. And we over-relied on our domain expertise in the UK that we hadn't validated was completely on the money in the US market. So when we first went to America, we were a data analytics company that was going to complement their core workflow and their technology. It was like a bolt-on play. And that worked really well in the UK. We got that nailed down. We knew exactly how this technology sat in their overall workflow, how it worked, etc. And we went to the US market and it just didn't fit. It just didn't play out in the way that we were expecting. We got a little bit of success here and there, but not the kind of viral transformational success that we got in the UK. And we'd hired people over there. You know, you hire some really important people, you bring them in from like competitors who've worked in the market before, etc. It's like,
was there a more established competitor landscape in the States rather than the UK?
It was nothing to do with competitors. It was to do with the fact that we didn't understand the problem that was in the US market. And the problem was that the core workflow that we were following was so bad and so broken that you couldn't bolt new technology into it. What we learned was that, and this was more the licking the wounds learnings afterwards, was that what they needed wasn't the Band-Aid. They needed to completely overhaul exactly like the core workflow, the core infrastructure. And so that caused us to really look at how we build the product out.
Okay.
And so we then built out a new product, which is around audit methodology, audit workflow, how they document the work, which the data analytics sits within and complements. But when we went back to the US, we went with a very different approach. We went with a different product first to say, we know that your pain point is this. I mean, these accountants in the US are using technology that's over 20 years old. It works in the desktop. Well, I say works-ish in the desktop. And it's fundamentally broken. And so we walk in and we go, we get that this is broken. Here's a new way of doing it. And we'll bring the data analytics in when you're ready and when you've got this core infrastructure. You know, the core of the apple is rotten. Let's fix that and let's then build from there. But my lessons as a CEO was I didn't spend enough time there. And so, you know, Graham and I would talk and we say, well, look, if our business depended on it, what would we do to break the American market? And I guess, what would you guys do, right? If you had to make it in the US market and your entire business relied on it, what would you do to break the American market?
Go and live there.
Go and live there, right? You would go and live there. So you've got to think about, okay, so my business doesn't rely on that. I've got a really good business, even if I don't count the American market. But if that's what it would take, if it depended on it, then why am I not doing that? Well, there's a good number of reasons why I haven't moved to the US market.
Just sorry to cut across your mark, but I actually think that's really remarkable, though. And I think a lot of people will be listening to this thinking, wow, because I think what most people do, it's not only existential, as you said, that you can't survive, but there's loads of businesses nibbling at America, would love to crack the US. And what they do is they hire people over there, or they might look for one of their team who's willing to move over there. I think for a founder to go, I'm going to go and spend a significant, I think there's not many people willing to take that sacrifice. And I'm sure we'll come on to there's loads of plus points, but I think that is really unusual and why one of the reasons you've been successful.
I think you've got to, it's one thing. So we told the business about 5 years ago, everything needs to be US first. That means if you're building the product, I don't care what the UK customers want. I want to know if it's a US thing first, and then we'll back it into the UK. Because everything was UK and then we'd change it for the US. I said, no, flip it. Everything needs to be US first. The product, the processes that we're building, everything that is in this organization, you think about the US first, and then you think about other markets. But then if I was saying that at the top seat, and then I was sat in my ivory tower in Newcastle, not willing to go and actually spend time over there, that's not really living that message, right? So I spend, I think it's close to 3 to 4 months a year now in the US market. And why do I do that? Because
you love Disneyland.
I love Disneyland. And I have an annual pass for Disney, and I live in Kissimmee in Florida and basically just go to Disney. But I also spend time traveling around, going and meeting people, shaking hands, but listening to them. And our market, the US, has really responded to the fact that I'm there and I'm listening and I'm then doing something about it. And that's also the best way you can bring your company brand to life. You can do all the marketing you want in the world, but people's impression of a business will be made or broken based on their interactions with the people. And I go there and I am as straight as a die in terms of what we're all about, what we're trying to do. And I've even gone to meetings of chief innovation officers, great one was last year, 12 months ago, 40 people in the room. And I was supposed to do a 20-minute sales presentation. And I got up at the start and I said, guys, I want to break America. And I think that you should want me to break America, because even if you don't want to buy our software, you should want there to be more competition in this market. So will you give me your ideas as to what I need to do to break this market? They talked me through that for about 80 minutes of my 20 minutes slot that I had. And we left with the playbook that we needed to go and do. But importantly, I'm going back there next week and I'm going to show them that everything that they told me we've done.
Fantastic.
And that's how you build trust. That's how you build credibility. It's also how these people feel like they've been heard and listened to, which for us, might not necessarily be the same for everybody else, but for us, that's a complete juxtaposition with what they're used to. They're used to being told, you don't really matter, we're too big, you'll get your software when we decide you're going to get your software, from the big incumbent providers.
Interesting. Do you think that same approach would work with a UK audience? Do you think there's something different about the US market that approach which you've described, which again is unorthodox, would be that's suitable for the US market?
For a US business coming to the UK?
Yeah. And the reason I ask is I follow your marketing content online. We've spoken in the past. Obviously, we've worked with you. And there's an American style to the boldness of your statement. We're here to revolutionise the audit and accountancy landscape. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. There's a confidence to the way Inflo present themselves to the market, which feels quite American. It's got none of the kind of polite embarrassment that many UK entrepreneurs or businesses exhibit. So I wonder whether you standing on stage saying, "We're here to break America. Can you guys tell me what you want?" Whether that's it's perfect, a hand fitting into a perfect glove that you're made for the US market.
But a bit of confidence also overlap with a bit of humility as well, because you're not going there saying, "We've got it right, we've got it perfect." Actually, what I want is your time, and we'll go and innovate and we'll develop product that actually meets your needs. So yeah, that mix of confidence and humility seems to have gone down pretty well.
Yeah, and it's been humble to say that we haven't got this right in the past, so let's learn some lessons. But I think you'd need to refine the approach if you were from the outside of the UK coming in, or even if you're thinking about European markets. You've got to bear in mind the US is massive. Like the geographical kind of size of the US actually then paints into how open and willing to collaborate they are, because they don't really, like those 40 CIOs in the room don't really compete with each other. If you did that in the UK, in our accounting market, you'd be doing it in London and they would all compete with each other. Yeah. And so there's a slightly different mindset here, which is maybe I'm not going to be quite as open about what I'm doing and how I'm leading things. But that's not to say that the approach wouldn't work. I think you just need to refine it. So I walk in a room and I can do that with a big group of people. If you can't do that, go and do it one-on-one with people. Go and build relationships and try to gather the information you need to do a better job in the future. Because if you pitch from day one, you're not going to build relationships because you're just in sales mode. And they're also only going to give you a certain kind of feedback. Whereas if you go there and just are openly going, "Just help me like compete with these guys, will you? Like, you must be sick of what you're getting from these guys." That's the bit. And you've got to be open as well. You've got to be kind of try and be transparent with them about what your plans are. We speak to people about what our exit strategies and things like that to get them comfortable with, right, these are some people that I like spending time with first and foremost. And then from there, maybe I could do business with them as well.
Yeah, fascinating. So 3 to 4 months a year, you're over there at the moment. Family spend over the time over there with you?
Yeah, the family travel with me as much as we possibly can.
Fantastic. You mentioned there that you would talk to those clients about your long-term plans and exit plans. Do you mind sharing what they are today? Kind of what's the long-term vision for Inflo?
Well, the medium-term vision is unicorn status. So we are looking to, in 4 years' time, establish the business with the unicorn valuation, i.e. $1 billion. Now, one thing that's important to put some context around that is that's not because we care about the valuation of the business, because valuation of the business would probably imply, they're looking to exit. No, that's just simply a marker for us that we've achieved a size and a scale and an impact that's going to be acknowledged and recognized, not just here in Newcastle. Like there's only ever been, I think, one unicorn created in the northeast of England, and it doesn't exist anymore. So firstly, breaking that ground, but secondly, putting ourselves on the national and the quite kind of global scale. And it also means that it puts our business in a place where it's not just going to be consumed by one of the big incumbent providers out there. It's not going to be that kind of story of, that looked like it was promising, but then it got acquired by X and then it died. So for us, it's about, that's the milestone that's on the horizon. And then from there, it's like, well, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep building. We're going to keep establishing Inflo as something that is a disruptive player in the medium to longer term. So there is no exit strategy. There is a plan to build an incredible business. Unicorn is one milestone on that journey. And it's something that's really tangible and motivates the entire team because they can get behind that kind of status of a company. Yeah. And then from there, we'll be continually thinking, right, well, what's the next thing that we want to do?
Yeah, fantastic. And you've talked about your relationship with Graham and how you kind of bounce off one another. as the business has reached 150 people, you've obviously had to strengthen and expand that leadership team as you've gone. How have you found that experience, and has your approach to leadership evolved as you've brought more people into that senior team?
It's been a roller coaster probably in terms of like how to get that right. And we've made a number of missteps over the years, which you learn a lot of lessons from. But this kind of junction of the business, we've really focused and prioritized on how do we promote people internally that we think have really strong potential. Maybe they're not quite ready for the roles that we want them to fill, but we have absolute confidence in their development and their growth potential. So we've made those mistakes where you go out and you think, right, I'm going to go and hire the really experienced SaaS growth heavy hitter. It just hasn't worked out for us because of that lack of domain expertise. And so this time around, we're focusing a bit more on how do we maybe replicate some of the things that have made us successful leaders. So maybe it is some of that audit experience. Maybe it is some of the kind of skill sets that we have in terms of our analytical capabilities and the way we things. That gives us a bit more confidence that we can work with those people because we've worked with them before. And so that's, I think, the risk that we've weighed up in the past, where the external hires at a quite senior level have proven to be quite difficult to embed into the business's DNA. We haven't exactly solved why that is. I think it's something that we've struggled with a little bit over the years. But now we're in a position where we feel really confident, really excited about the leadership team we've formed. And they've all been people that we've worked with for enough time to know that they live our core values, to know that they have that kind of DNA that's close enough to what we're all about, but also gives us a bit of diversity at that level.
Okay, great. You mentioned earlier that you love learning and evolving, and obviously the role of running a business changes as it gets bigger. You've mentioned 2 books, Geek and Traction, so you obviously read a lot. Where else do you take your kind of learnings from? How do you ensure that you keep evolving as a leader?
Yeah, books is really important, but obviously it's time consuming to read full books. So Blinkist is a great way of getting bite-sized chunks of things that you might want to dive into more or kind of keep at that high level. I also really follow a lot of podcasts. Particularly, there's a few that really resonate in terms of like Sastra podcasts are really, really strong in terms of as you're trying to scale up a business, get that kind of Silicon Valley mindset, which as long as you temper it a little bit with some of the bullshit that those guys really kind of bring to the table, like you can get some real nuggets there around how really rapid high growth businesses are approaching what similar kind of challenges to what you're trying to do. So listen a lot, read a lot, ask a lot of questions as well. So the time I spend with customers is clearly at a more higher level, more strategic level. I try and understand what's going on in their heads as much as possible to say, okay, well, what's going on at the top of our customers? Because I need to be credible to have that kind of conversation as well. So conferences is another thing as well, because I speak at a lot of conferences. I try to stay for the long as much as I can to try and absorb what else is going on and what other people are talking about. So that's how I try and immerse myself in a lot of things.
Yeah, okay. I'm a big Blinkist fan as well. I found with a lot of business books, they make a really interesting point which you can apply and then make the same point again for the next 10 chapters with lots of different examples. And I think Blinkist is a great way of cutting through that and going, right, here's some salient points. If you want to read further, you can.
Oh, AI is getting better at that as well. So like it can actually give you some decent book summaries, or can delve into a particular topic, or you can kind of go, okay, so assuming you'd read and embraced the concepts of X, how would you approach this problem? So
yeah, absolutely. And then looking ahead, you've talked about Inflo's long-term vision. How do you see the audit and accountancy world evolving? There's lots of talk that, AI will mean there's no need for auditors in 10 years' time. What do you see as being the outlook for the audit and accountancy sector?
Yeah, everything will just be done by AI. Nobody will have to do anything.
And how does that affect Inflo then?
I'm obviously being sarcastic. AI is a massive hype engine right now, and while I'm sure it will find its feet in accountancy, the sector that we focus on, is heavily regulated. What that means is that you've got to be able to explain how you got to answers and made certain decisions. Now, I'm sure that AI will continue to creep into what we do and what everybody else does. But one of the challenges right now is that everybody thinks that AI is Gen AI, and that's not the same thing. So AI's really got all the hype around it because of what OpenAI doing with ChatGPT, and everyone thinks that AI is ChatGPT. It isn't. ChatGPT is a very general AI, as in it can do a lot of things, but not very many of them very well. And that's great if you view Gen AI as like an intern. A lot of people are viewing it, though, as like the expert in the room. And that's where you get this real kind of disappointment right now that, oh, it can't even work out how many R's are in the word strawberry and stuff like this. But in reality, for a business like ours, we're looking at maybe some of the other flavors of AI than Gen AI. So how can we maybe look at prescriptive or detective or other kind of techniques that are much narrower in their capabilities, so they can't do all of the different things that ChatGPT can do, but they can really narrow a focus and do one particular activity really well. But to be quite candid, I just think that AI is just the next thing that's come. It's not going to completely and utterly transform everything in the way that people were talking about last year, because like everything, it's going through the Gartner hype curve. It was at the top of the hype cycle. It's now going through that kind of period where everyone's going to kind of face this whole, what was even the point of this thing? And then it'll find its feet when it gets to that kind of productivity layer. So again, if you've not looked at how Gartner hype curves work, it's the same for every technology, and AI is just going through that as well. So I'd see that from our perspective, it's just one tool in the tool bag. And what we need to focus on is, what is the task? What is the thing that our users are trying to do? If AI is the right thing to help them do that, great. If it isn't, then just use something else. It doesn't matter. But AI is getting hyped for a few reasons right now. And one of them is that tech companies get much higher valuations if they have AI in their product. So what that means is that there's a lot of stuff that isn't AI that's getting banded as AI. And there's a lot of businesses developing AI just for the sake of developing AI, because that's what investors are being attracted towards and giving higher multiples for. So if you're a business like ours that actually don't care whatsoever about attracting investors, you don't need to play the hype game around AI.
Interesting. And then we've talked a lot about Inflo, but regarding yourself, it's not without its stresses running a business with 150 people and delivering 106 different countries. How do you manage your work-life balance, and how do you, motivation firstly, and how do you find, what do you do to switch off? Or do you switch off?
Well, it's around trying to, for me, work-life balance it's a tricky kind of scenario, and people might have seen some of the Jeff Bezos stuff around work-life balance and whether that's the right way to frame this. But like for me, I am really excited about and enjoy the work that I do. And so that doesn't necessarily mean I need to worry about when I'm clocking in and clocking off, because it's stimulating, it's engaging, it's something that I want to do. Clearly, my family don't want me to work every single minute of the day. And so for me, it's around trying to establish working patterns or general principles around when I am going to be available to them and when I'm not. But we at Inflo really embrace the whole flexible working concept, not just around maybe you can kind of move a few hours here and there. There'll be just whole afternoons or days I'll just be like, I'm not in right now because I want to do something with the kids, the family, the schools, Christmas, etc. And it's really easy for me to do that because I don't have to report into anybody, but I also empower the whole business to embrace that mindset of there's more important things to life than work. Don't miss your kids' school play. Don't go and do things that there's more important things that you should be focusing on. So to answer your question, I try to put some structure into my day around when I'm going to work, when I'm not going to work, when I'm like with the family or overseas. You're out. So I spend time in Florida. I'll be there with the family at Disney.
I've seen photos of you working in Disneyland, working in Epcot.
Exactly. So let's take that example, right? So I posted on social media, I was working in Epcot. I woke up that morning and the wife and kids, Terry and the girls were basically saying, right, we're going to Epcot today. We're in the virtual queue for Guardians of the Galaxy, which is my favorite ride at Disney. And I looked at my schedule and I was like, you know what? I don't actually have any calls this morning. I'm going to come with you in the car. I'll work in the car. I'll do the ride, and then I'll go and sit in the cafe while you go and do some more stuff, do the things that I need to do, and then we'll go home. She's like, okay, yeah, cool. But they understand that, like, when I'm maybe in a Disney queue, standing for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, I'll be clearing some emails off. I'll be doing some stuff. They understand that, like, the choice is either I'm there doing those things on the pointless, there's nothing really to do here anyway, but I'm going to be with them on the rides and doing the cool things with them and everything. So I try and get that variety and that flexibility in the way I work.
How much do your kids understand about what you do and what Inflo do? And do they harbour aspirations to join the business at some point?
I think it's still a little bit young to decide whether they want to lead Inflo or not. Some of them
should have asked how old they are before I asked that question. You might say 2 and 3.
They might want to go back to the farm.
Yeah.
Right, they won't be doing that. My girls are 9 and 8 years old at this at point of recording, and they think that what I do is travel around the world, standing on a stage, talking rubbish, is what they phrase it as. And they've seen me present, and I use my hands quite a lot to talk. And so they mimic me, and they'll be walking around the house using their hands, going, "Look at me, I'm daddy, I'm talking rubbish on a stage." What's been interesting is I started writing books as ways of trying to explain the transformation that we're trying to bring to the accounting profession. And I love the idea of storytelling. And I was actually reading to the kids. I read bedtime story every night, and I was reading some of the Aesop's fables, and I was like, I like this idea that you can tell a story and there's a message behind it. And I was like, the fact that kids had no idea what the message was. It was always like, well, don't cut onions, Dad. I was like, that's not a story. But what that's been able to do as well is be able to connect with them on a different level, to be able to explain that what I do is about helping people to use a chainsaw rather than use an axe. All right, I get that. I'm working with people in a way that they view you as somebody who's a partner rather than somebody who's just there in it for themselves. And so the books have been a really good way of trying to connect with my children. And what I've found is that some of our customers have also shared it's been a great way for them to connect with their children.
Is that where you originally came with the idea? I should say Mark very kindly brought Simon and I each a copy of his second book today. Is that where that idea came from, explaining it to your children and thinking, there must be an easier way to do this?
Do you want to know what the real motivation behind the first story was? I lost a sale that really annoyed me. Really annoyed me. And when that firm told me no, they were going with something else, I was so mad that I needed to find a way of channeling that. It was one that I'd invested years in. I'd kind of got it to the point where I thought it was good to go. And then they went with something else. And I was so annoyed. I was like, I need to find a more productive way of channeling this anger.
It's a very cathartic process of getting it down on paper.
Yeah, exactly. So I went upstairs, read the kids the bedtime story, and then that was a Friday. And then I got up the next day and I was like, I think I can tell this in a story about how people refuse to embrace innovation. And, what they'd done was that firm had said, no, we don't want to go with you. We're going to go with the trusted brand name that's got a much more dated way of doing things, but it's much closer to what we're currently doing. So we feel a bit more comfortable with it, etc. All the kind of usual objections of we want to go with somebody else. And I was like, right, I think I can tell this in the story of a lumberjack who refuses to embrace the chainsaw and just sticks with his trusty axe. And I think that I can tell that story better than I can tell the story of why our product is better than this product over here. I actually wrote it in one go, and then I sent it to my team and said, I'm not sure, my humor is far too sarcastic. I was like, I think this is really funny, but that's me and I wrote it. Like, what do you think about this? Is this something we should do as a company? And
helpful to have a culture of honest dissenting voices at that point.
Yeah, and they laughed at it and thought it was funny because it's stacked with almost like, you know, the 10 years at that point in time of like all the shit that I just had to kind of deal with across trying to get accountants to do something differently. And it's a lot of like things I experienced at PwC and kind of the like, you know, arrogant partners and this, that, and the other. So there's all kind of little things not stitching, but it was all in a...
Have you had any messages saying, Mark, can I just ask, is that me in that part?
No, not on that one. But what that... I wrote in a Word document, I sent it to my team. I then sent it to my US team and said, right, this is British humour. The British guys think it's funny. What do you guys think? They were like, this is hilarious. I was like, okay. But we didn't do anything with it for about 2 years because I knew that like it's one thing having the story. I needed to find a way of actually like presenting the story. And then we found a children's illustrator who was able to basically take the story.
They're fantastic illustrations.
And then turn it into, the first one was A Better Axe, it was called. And that book we use at like trade shows. We send it to customers. We kind of use it as just a way of telling the story. But what's been really powerful has been that those people have then used that to talk to their kids or to talk to other people. Or like I had one person came and he took 10 books from me and said, I want to run a management development course and I'm going to sit and we're going to work through the book and unpick it and everything like that. And so it's worked really well for us because it's different, right? You know, when you go to a trade show and everyone's offering you a pen or some kind of free water bottle and all this kind of stuff, right? Great. When you get given something that's like a book that's had like a lot of thought put into it, it really connects with people. It's been a differentiator for us. So
yeah, fantastic. And then you've been really giving of your time today, so thank you for joining us. We always close with the same question.
Killer
question. If you could tell your younger self something which you think would have got you to the point you are now quicker, or what would that thing be that you would like to tell the younger Mark Edmondson, your learnings of running a high growth business?
Has anyone ever said to you they wouldn't tell him anything?
No, well, there's only your third one of these.
Just sit there for 5 seconds and think, yeah, I should probably think of something.
Yeah. See, I like what I've enjoyed most about this is I'm a problem solver. And so I actually like the thrill of going through the full journey rather than being given a cheat code.
Yeah.
It's why I don't massively spend a lot of time with like mentors and other kind of things like that, because yeah, there's a lot of benefit you can get from that. But for me, I kind of want to learn it all firsthand.
I get that.
And so it's a bit of a cop out to your question, but I don't think I would go back and tell myself anything. I would be more inclined to go, I want to almost go through those learnings, because I'm sat here in the chair today with the business I've got today because I've made those mistakes and I've like earned those kind of, you know, scars, if you like, over the time. And it's one of those things like the butterfly effect, I guess. Maybe I've been watching too much Netflix recently of like some of these things, but like you change one thing, like,
who knows where you would end up?
Who knows where I would be? So I'm really, really happy with where I am right today, and I don't think I'd change it.
So think ahead to the future then. If there are still problems to solve, then it suggests that your appetite to continue to solve them will persist for years, decades, as long as the challenge is there.
Yeah, that's the fun of it, right? Like, why would I be doing this if it wasn't, like, for me, it's all about the thrill of the challenge. So how do we do the next thing? And that's why one of the things I'm really bad at is kind of taking stock of where we are, looking back and celebrating the successes we've achieved. Because for me, it's all about, well, what's the next thing we're going to do? What's the kind of the challenge that is coming towards us that we can really go after and we can go and solve between us? So
yeah, fantastic. Right, well, thank you again for joining us today. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Cheers, Mark.
Cheers.